Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to the 17th edition of the MCA Trade and Learn Mechanical Show. My name is Neisa Sanchez Quintana, and I am Project Manager at Standard Refrigeration Company, Inc. This afternoon, I have the pleasure of acting as moderator of this seminar we have titled Economic Development Opportunities. Here at MCA, our basic principles of learning, train, skill, competence, ability, teach, education, and knowledge rest in the process of not only representing our member companies in their commercial development, but in expanding their technical knowledge, which is critical in our industry and henceforth increases the caliber to those who we represent. We would like to give a special welcome to the fine speakers we will have today during the seminar. Our friends Roderick Miller, Gail Nolan, and Michael Gay from Invest Puerto Rico. The seminar will be provided in English, but you will be able to ask your questions in Spanish and I will translate them if necessary. We hope you enjoy it and learn of the great opportunities that are being generated in Puerto Rico. Before we begin, we would like to recognize the support provided by Invest to this event. It is the product of a cooperation memorandum that we signed last June. Thanks to their initiative of Bring Pharma Back, we are committed to develop the construction aspect of reshoring together, expecting the return of all pharmaceutical and medical device operations back to our beaches. We would like to thank the Institute of Mechanical Engineers of the Professional College of Engineers and Land Surveyors of Puerto Rico, its president, Engineer Sailis Perez, for 17 straight years supporting this wonderful event. Thanks to their board of director members that are attending the different seminars this afternoon. Likewise, our recognition goes to the associations of general contractors, builders, industrials, pharmaceutical industries, and the local chapter of ASHRAE. Together, we have accepted this mission to help Puerto Rico. A special welcome to the professors and students of our 4 universities, which have engineering programs, to whom we have extended a special invitation free of charge to integrate the entire scientific community into this effort. Because all seminars are starting at the same time, we have a recorded message from our president, the CEO, and the marketing director of this event, Javier Cardeguin Vázquez, Mario Franceschini, Salom, and Nestor Davila Burgos, respectively. Can you hear me? I'm having problems with the audio.
We can hear you, Nisa, but the videos we couldn't hear.
Yeah, okay. Let me see if I can go back to that slide.
Keep it on, my Nisa. Don't worry, keep on.
Okay. Before starting the presentations, I want to remind the members of the Colegio de Ingenieros that in addition to always maintaining their connection to the seminar, they require that you complete a quiz in order to credit you with 3 hours of credit contact. I will provide you with the link to the quiz before the seminar is over. You will have 48 hours to answer it, beginning next Monday through July 31st. You will have access to all recorded seminars taking place today, so you can learn from each and save for future reference. A few notes before we begin. It's important that the Colegio de Ingenieros members must enter at this time their name and license or certificate number in the chat area here provided within Zoom, especially those who were enrolled by someone else. For each 1-hour period of this seminar, topics will be covered during the first 50 minutes, followed by 10 minutes for questions and answers. There is a question and answer area in the lower center of the Zoom screen to ask questions. You can ask the questions in either English or Spanish. I'm going to read them out loud in English, and the speaker will go ahead and answer for all of us. Now I will introduce our first speaker, Mr. Roderick T. Miller. Roderick Miller is Chief Executive Officer at Invest Puerto Rico, the island's public-private partnership focused on business attraction and investment promotion. Miller is recognized as one of the foremost economic development leaders in the country, respected for his ability to maneuver in complex political and business environments and craft strategies to provide long-term value to communities and investors. Prior to coming to Puerto Rico, Miller led economic recovery efforts for the cities of Detroit and New Orleans. Miller holds a Master of Public Policy from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government and a Bachelor of Science degree in International Business from St. Augustine's College. He also gained a graduate diploma in finance from the Monterrey Institute of Technology in Mexico while completing a Fulbright Fellowship. Please welcome Mr. Roderick Miller.
Thanks so much for that warm introduction, and I'm going to hop right in with the hope that we can kind of catch up on time as well as have adequate time for Q&A. So I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to begin screen sharing now and hopefully walk you through a presentation. Please confirm that folks are able to see the screen. I think it should be showing now. It says reshoring for Puerto Rico.
I can see it.
Yeah,
perfect.
Looks great.
Thanks so much. So really excited to be sharing with the Mechanical Contractors Association the reshoring opportunity, which is the opportunity of companies that have been left the mainland U.S., have left the U.S. and have located in other markets or for manufacturing, production, you name it. And over the last probably 30 years, there's a tremendous opportunity for those companies now and an extensive push for them to come back to the U.S. mainland or in areas in close proximity. Puerto Rico is specifically positioned extraordinarily well to take advantage of this, given our strong experience in the pharmaceutical sector, our geographic location, and a variety of other reasons. So we're going to talk a little bit about why this is the strategy that Invest Puerto Rico is trying to pursue in keeping with our mandate and how we need to work with you to get it done. So hopping right in, so biosciences reshoring, why Puerto Rico? Well, this is very clear. Today, biosciences represents $63.7 billion of the economy and makes up close to half of the island's total manufacturing. And we know that manufacturing represents roughly half of the island's economy. So you're talking about a major driver of Puerto Rico's economy historically and will continue to be. Now, there are all the conversations about what it was in the past and versus what it is today. But I believe that the best for Puerto Rico and pharmaceuticals is ahead. And hopefully we can talk about what that means. Why Invest Puerto Rico? Invest Puerto Rico, our mandate is very simple. It is to bring in private investment and quality jobs. We just had an announcement yesterday of about 228 million in new investments and 400 new jobs, companies similar solutions, and cytoimmune, which are on the gene cell therapy side of the industry. But those are the sorts of things that we're focused on. How do we bring more jobs and higher quality jobs? Our model, for those who aren't familiar with Invest Puerto Rico, is we're a private nonprofit that provides support to the government in terms of attracting new investment. And we've been around for about 2 years in actuality, and probably about 4 years on paper. So Invest Puerto Rico, and then why pharmaceutical sector? As we all know, not only is it huge here, but the bioscience sector has grown consistently over the past 5 years, particularly in Puerto Rico. And and then when you consider that with the realities of the COVID crisis, it's created new opportunities for Puerto Rico to reposition itself on the global stage. So we want to get more than our fair share as a market in that. And I think it's something that we can do. We know how to do it, but it's going to take a concerted and a strategic kind of partnership with the private sector, the public sector, nonprofit. And now is the time, because we know that, COVID-19 really underscored the fragility of our logistics, of our supply chain. And the fact is that when American citizens needed key things in order to survive this pandemic, it wasn't there. And I think now the federal government has a positioning as it relates to this, that this is a national security interest. And now I will argue with anyone that Puerto Rico is the best place in the United States to actually lead, making sure that we have this security long term. So this is what this conversation is really about. So what do we need to make this happen? There are 4 things that I think are kind of at the center of this conversation, this idea of talent. How do we bring world-class talent and continue to cultivate talent and continue to keep the talent that we have? Having incentives that are competitive on a global scale. Both leveraging the existing infrastructure, but also figuring out how do we add to that existing infrastructure. And of course, highlighting our resilience. Resilience is nothing new to Puerto Rico, whether we look at the fiscal crisis, the earthquakes, hurricanes. At every step of the way, Puerto Rico's always bounced back bigger, better, and stronger. And I think for many markets, this is their first time really confronting challenge. And Puerto Rico's like, oh, this is what we do. So all of those things, this mix of talent, incentives, infrastructure, and resilience are really at the core of what's driving it. And so in the next few minutes, I'd like to share some of our thoughts on this before bringing in Brenda Torres for a bigger conversation. So let's talk about our strategy, our approach to attracting companies. There's 3 elements of our reshoring strategy that are kind of at the core. Targeting. So how do we figure out what companies make sense? What companies make sense and why? Tracking and measurement. How do we, over time, see where the global flows of investment are going, where they're coming from, what the profile of the companies are? That's the stuff that's really going to allow us to refine our strategy to go after companies that we have the highest capacity to land. And then capacity building. There is a profile of a company that's most likely to expand to Puerto Rico within this reshoring mix. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that profile looks as we go forward. But at the core of this is we've got to figure out, be very strategic about how do we target geographically, sector, capacity, the right types of companies. How do we track and measure what's going on globally over time so that we can refine our value proposition and our approach? And then how do we build capacity in the market so that we can answer the call of these companies that are in a phase of expansion? So let's start with targeting. So we've got to evaluate the assets that are on the island around these 7 competitive criteria, which we'll share in just a second, and define the targets for strongest value proposition. So some of the assets that are distinguishing assets for us include not just our geographic positioning, but the size of the pharmaceutical sector, our history in that sector, as well as the infrastructure we bring to bear in terms of ports and airports. And so we've got to evaluate those assets and say, what's the gap between the capacity of those assets and the opportunity that the market presents? Review the global supply chain disruptions and identify foreign producers with the greatest U.S. market share at risk. Well, what are you talking about, Rod? Global supply chain and U.S. market share at risk. When we looked at the profile going through this targeting process, everyone said, oh, all the companies, you need to just go focus on China and bring all these companies out of China. Well, when we started to really review that, yeah, there's a lot of investment in China and India as well. But what we found is that most of these companies, while they were producing in China and India, they were backed by U.S. investment funds, by European investment funds, or doing contract manufacturing for U.S. or European firms. So while geographically they're located in those markets, they had a very strong tie to the U.S. and to Europe, which actually gives us a different kind of approach in terms of how do we go through selling and actually repositioning Puerto Rico. And of course, we got to review the federal list of high priority, these API products for repatriation, and compare those against the assets on the island. So we've combed a list of about 600 companies out of China in the API space, and we identified about 20 of those that we thought were high targets for Puerto Rico for a variety of reasons, owned by a significant investment from private equity. And it's interesting to note that the companies where we're seeing the biggest attraction to Puerto Rico now are not the model of the companies that have been here historically. A lot of the companies that we're seeing now are emerging firms, small, mid-sized firms with significant venture or private equity backing, and that are trying to figure out how do they grow in a market that actually is strong from an industry sector perspective, but also provides an appropriate level of tax coverage of incentives and stuff to kind of help these companies be successful. We're working with logistics partners to determine which companies have the greatest potential to benefit from an air transshipment waiver. As I'm sure most of you know, the U.S. government has given Puerto Rico a waiver for the next, for now it's probably about a year, a little over a year left, but it was a 2-year waiver that basically said that things that are loading and unloading both passengers as well as cargo in Puerto Rico, there would not be any fee. And that actually completely repositions us in this region, and we're seeing benefits of that already. I mean, in November of this past year, Virgin Atlantic announced that it was launching an air cargo service from San Juan, and this is what they said in the release. They said, in addition, in response to the rapidly changing external environment and a drop in passenger demand, there's also been a significant increase in cargo demand due to the pandemic. Virgin Atlantic said that it is set to fly to more than 800 destinations in November of this past year, of which almost 60% are for cargo operations. And so within that context, they decided, Puerto Rico was a strategic market to expand that cargo, and we're trying to identify other opportunities for that. And of course, we're looking for supply chain gaps where that can actually take advantage of the foreign trade zone designation that Puerto Rico has, and really figure out how to have additional value because of that. So how do we target these companies? Remember, I mentioned there were 7 big buckets. Number 1 is differentiated assets. So what are the assets that Puerto Rico brings to bear from a logistics perspective, from a knowledge perspective? What are the policy levers that we have? Talent and workforce, quite frankly, is the most important driver, and Puerto Rico has that in droves if we can keep it and keep that talent here, and that's an important piece. Academic research, transportation, support organizations like MCA, and of course, real estate are all drivers of what kinds of companies we can successfully attract to the island. As I mentioned, we reviewed a federal list of high priority products, these APIs, and there are a lot of opportunities, and those will be continuing to move back. I think we're probably looking over the next 2 or 3 years at a significant amount of opportunity, because in my conversations with site selectors and investors, they're making multiple decisions at the same time. One of the decisions is how they expand, but also in many cases, it's about how do you actually bring, consolidate as well. So there are decisions about what facilities are going to be closed or going to be downsized, as well as where there are additional opportunities. As we started to do this work from a geographic perspective, we realized that many of the companies from a production perspective are in Asia, but had strong ties to the US and Europe. And on the US side, we're finding that the West Coast, California, is a very strong market where a lot of these decision makers are based, and as well as the Northeast, primarily New York and Boston. So we're hitting those markets hard and trying to make sure that they understand the value that Puerto Rico has to offer as they consider expanding their companies. I've talked about the foreign trade zone. I'll keep going. And then, of course, this idea of ultimately our strategy has to be fluid enough to actually respond to the market. And so in looking at what that really means, It's what are the deals that are happening day in and day out? Where are they coming from? Where are they going? And what's changing? So we've been very aggressive. We've got a transshipment committee, and my colleague Gail Nolan, I think, is presenting at the 4 o'clock hour about our transshipment strategy. But on the transshipment front, we're talking. We have a collaboration of a variety of industry leaders in pharma, federal and local government, and logistics, and we're trying to figure out how do we actually advocate for the types of not only policies, but also kind of see where the market is going and attack it in a strategic way. And it's really about how do we track things, how do we document them, and how do we move things forward. And then, of course, last but not least, as it relates to our strategy, is there has to be a significant component of capacity building. So we know what assets we have, but do the assets that we have, can they currently actually meet the demand of where the market is going? So for example, the Aguadilla Airport, which is slated for a significant amount of investment, to expand for the runway and some other things, also has development capacity around it. And so how do we actually plug in those assets strategically so that we can increase what they can do? I mean, providing more cold storage and those sorts of things in the market are critical. From an air hub perspective, defining optimal passenger belly cargo fuel ratios is a lot of the work that the transshipment committee is doing. And of course, infrastructure and not just on the logistics side, but also on the energy side, continue to be a key driver of what we'll be able to do. So let's talk a little bit about how we sell and how we promote, and then I look forward to getting into this conversation with Brenda. So you understand now that we have a very clear way that we identify companies. We try to figure out from a sector perspective, what are the sweet spots where Puerto Rico has capacity, from the perspective of our labor force, of our assets, and in alignment with where we think the economy needs to grow. So we're focused on quality growth, not just growth for the sake of growth. And the reality of COVID is that it created a new opportunity for Puerto Rico that we wouldn't have had without the pandemic. So we want to be, careful, but we also want to be aggressive in trying to figure out how do we leverage this opportunity, our strategic position from a geographic perspective, our capacity from a historical perspective of knowing this industry to scale quickly. Well, our approach to attracting businesses with those targets in mind is, number one, we leverage networks. We leverage corporate real estate executives, site selectors, C-level executives, relationships with folks like you. We try to do events and outreach. So whether it's webinars online, whether it's attending global conferences, and then we also try to figure out how do we work the relationships with existing companies in our pipeline and companies on the island to understand what your needs are. And then last but not least, it's all about ecosystems. No one organization can deliver completely on the mandate of bringing new companies to Puerto Rico, which is why partners like PIA and the MCA are critical. And from a promotion perspective, we aim to inform. So we want to make sure that folks know what Puerto Rico has to offer. And so through the website, social media, those sorts of things, we try to inform, promote, and then we really want to lead by making sure that the messages that are out there in the marketplace are the messages that we need to advance the idea of bringing new companies to Puerto Rico. At this point, we're focused on, continuing to do targeted outreach to companies. We, of course, had an industry capabilities tour last fall where the White House and other federal agencies came along with companies to see what the capacity of the island is. And I'll tell you what was encouraging is they were excited about making perhaps, 9 or 10 digit investment in the island. And I think we have the similar opportunities based on initial conversations with the new administration in DC. Of course, I'll be going to DC along with the governor and the head of the Department of Commerce, hopefully in the coming months, to actually continue to further this agenda. And then, of course, we're making recommendations not only to the federal government, but also to the local government to figure out how do we advance this. We want to work closely with the private sector, and I can guarantee you that these are the things that you'll always get from us. We don't want to play politics. We're about trying to figure out how do we get jobs and investment in Puerto Rico as soon as possible and as strategically. We will communicate what's going on, and we have our doors swing on hinges of information and transparency and accountability. So from an Invest Puerto Rico perspective, there is no hiding the P. As a matter of fact, we need you to actually be successful in our mandate. And then you can collaborate with us by sharing information about what you're seeing happening in the marketplace and opportunities, communicating your stories of success so we can leverage them in our marketing and business development. Because quite frankly, if companies that are already here on the island can't be successful, we can't be successful in bringing new companies. And they need to know that companies that are here in Puerto Rico have had a lot of success. We will be reaching out in different fora to you to try and figure out how do we push things forward and get your perspective. And you should consider us a partner. Don't ever hesitate to contact me or members of our team, which are displayed on the slide on the board. And so at this time, I'm really excited to be able to chat for a few minutes with Brenda Torres. Brenda has a very rich and deep background. She's with Amgen. And let me see here. I want to do her justice. She's the site head of Amgen's flagship manufacturing site. She's responsible for drug substance and drug product manufacturing at Amgen in Puerto Rico. She has over 25 years of experience in the biopharmaceutical industry. She joined Amgen in 2006 as an executive director of supply chain and has several positions across sites in Thousand Oaks, Massachusetts, and Puerto Rico. Prior to Amgen, she worked at Abbott Laboratories, Pepsi Cola, and Baxter Healthcare. She was born in Ponce and graduated from the Polytechnic University in Puerto Rico. She also holds a master's degree and bachelor's degree in industrial engineering. So we're glad to welcome her here, and I want to jump right into it. Brenda, as I mentioned, some of the things that are really important are talent. To me, that's number one. Incentives, infrastructure, and resilience. Those are, to me, things that Puerto Rico has in droves, but we can always improve on it. I'd love your perspective, both as a leader at PIA, but also as a leader at Amgen, on how you think about these things. Welcome.
Roderick, first of all, thank you for this invitation. I am pleased to be here in representation of the Pharmaceutical Industry Association of Puerto Rico. We always appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you, Invest Puerto Rico and MCA. What you are seeing here on the screen are the 4 critical areas to maintain and continue expanding our manufacturing hub in Puerto Rico. I couldn't let you, talent, incentive, infrastructure, resiliency, all of them are critical for our success. And we wish to have more time to talk in more detail, but this will be a good start. And we are looking forward to continuing the discussion and collaboration with you in the future. So in the talent side, talent in Puerto Rico is a great asset for the biopharmaceutical industry. And we have a world class of talent here. Also, PIA collaborates closely with all the universities in Puerto Rico, especially the engineering ones, in the Colegio de Mayagüez and the Polytechnic University, the pharmacy of school as well, to improve the capability of the graduates to meet the needs of the pharmaceutical industry. We sponsor many of the co-op programs and funds for multiple scholarships to support the academia. Right now, in fact, many executives from Puerto Rico are in top biopharma manufacturing roles around the world. And we have over 60 years of experience in manufacturing, and this is a strength that we have to use in our favor. The biopharma industry only currently has around 18,000 direct jobs and has 60,000 in the indirect jobs. And as well, the incentive part, Puerto Rico is a great place to do business. It's part of a competitive tax incentive that the IRS code provide, and the government of Puerto Rico offers to manufacturing companies. The business environment has changed a lot in the recent years, but we still been very competitive. But our competition is getting tougher every day. So it's not just about taxes. The whole business environment is evaluated when choosing to manufacture products in the pipeline. So we believe Puerto Rico must be part of the solution for onshoring U.S. manufacturing jobs in the U.S. And we can be key in bringing back more manufacturing jobs. Just maintaining the manufacturing facilities we already have in Puerto Rico is a big challenge. To grow the sector is an even bigger challenge, but it can be done if we all work together. We also need the help of the Congress to achieve this. And that is why PIA believes that a competitive advantage is the best way to help Puerto Rico to get out of the economic depression that we have in the last 15 years. We all want to make Puerto Rico a better place to work and to live in. And we firmly believe this industry will continue to be a key player. In the infrastructure side, in the overall, the access that we have in transportation to the US main island and the global markets is very competitive. But Hurricane Maria and the fiscal situation of Puerto Rico has taken a toll on the Puerto Rico infrastructure. So we need to rebuild a resilient, efficient, and reliable infrastructure for the energy, for the potable water, the bridge, and the highways, and also the telecommunications to surpass those business goals. Our sites in Puerto Rico depend on the Puerto Rico infrastructure to be capable to delivering the critical products that the patients need around the world. The resilience part is also key, and we are committed not only to continue our business, but also to help Puerto Rico and all the communities around us. And the successful execution of our business continuity plans after Maria and COVID-19 are not. So we have been tested with those challenges, and we have our robust plans and excellent execution have made Puerto Rico a new standard for worldwide excellence. We are really eager to continue our collaboration in other sectors and the government so they can learn to be more resilient
Brenda, are you there?
Okay, I was getting ready to ask if that was just on my sign, but she seems
Yeah.
frozen.
Yes.
So we'll wait for her to get back on. But while she's doing that, I mean, there are a few things to me that really jumped out, even in the comments that she made. One of the things that she talked about was talent. And Puerto Rico is already known for world-class talent in the pharmaceutical industry. But one of the things that we're tackling is the question, Brenda, good to have you back. One of the questions that we're tackling from a talent perspective is, what should Puerto Rico do? What should we be doing to keep more of the talent here? Because I think it's a catch-22. Part of it is we produce such good talent, but because we produce such good talent, everybody wants Puerto Rico's talent. And I think it's probably worthwhile. I mean, we're fortunate that we were able to get you back to the island, but I think a lot of folks leave that have a lot of capacity in this sector, and we struggle to figure out how to get them back. What are some of the things you think we could be doing in terms of how do we keep our talent here in Puerto Rico and keep those ties strong? Do you have thoughts about that?
You know, as we were talking about in the PIA Association, we have a great connection with the academia, in which we are going to continue developing and sponsoring different activities that can help us to reach that talent and to keep that talent engaged in our facilities. You know, I know that a lot of people go, but there is a lot of people that come as well, because they you know, this island is in their hearts. And as soon as they see the opportunities here, you know, it will be kind of very easy for them to come back to their island together with their families. So I believe that will be a win-win situation for all of them if we have the right place for them.
Well, one of the things is I know this presentation is going to be online, and that there will be people from all over the world looking at it. And one of the things I'll say is, I'm not from Puerto Rico, pero ya me hice boricua. I love it here. And part of the reason why I love it is not just the quality of life, but I love it because of the caliber of professionals and the caliber of companies that we have on the island. One of the things that you mentioned that I'd love for you to kind of go a little bit deeper into is you talked about the importance of infrastructure. And the reality is Puerto Rico has world-class bones in terms of kind of the core stuff is there, But I also think, there's this need for reinvestment in infrastructure to kind of modernize it and upgrade it and that sort of thing. How do you think about prioritization of infrastructure, logistics infrastructure versus power versus some of the things, because there's so much that needs to happen.
We are blessed to be in this place in the Caribbean that we have access to everywhere in a very short time. We export to many countries, and we are very successful. I think that the priorities should be in the energy, in the water, in the bridge, and the highways, and the telecommunications, so we can modernize our systems and support better the companies that are here. We have airports, and we can easily manage the logistics from here. It has been our expertise from 60 years ago. We have been done for a while. So if we are able to make sure that we prioritize the energy and the water and the bridges and the highways, I think that we will be in a better position.
One of the things that I've heard, well, what I heard before I moved to Puerto Rico, and then I found out the truth was very different when I got here, was after hurricanes, after Hurricane Maria and Irma, one of the things that people said, oh, the logistic, everything fell apart in Puerto Rico. And when I got here, what I learned is that things really didn't fall apart. Some of the challenges were mainly related to, US regulators being able to come and check the infrastructure. And then I met with a lot of companies that said they didn't have a lot of downtime after. Can you talk a little bit, and then after that, maybe we can open it up for Q&A, and maybe Nasa can come back on. But could you speak a little bit to the capacity and the resilience in the manufacturing sector in Puerto Rico, and how that's a selling point for us specifically, from a manufacturing perspective?
The manufacturing industry in Puerto Rico shown a huge commitment. Not only to support the open reality. This is an effort that can be, exemplary. If we have a unified hands all together, because we learn and we
Yeah, I don't know if that's the same for everyone. I was having a hard time hearing Brenda there, so I maybe she'll come back with us in a minute and flush that out. But Nasa, would love for you to join us again, and I know we have a little bit of time, I think, for a few questions from those in the audience. So at this time, I don't take any questions.
Okay, can you hear me okay? I know that Brenda's back, so.
Great.
Do you want to go ahead and do some questions?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Thank you, Brenda, for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Likewise. Okay, so here we go for the first question. Is it true that Puerto Rico is still a pharma manufacturing leader? How do you guys feel about that?
I mean, that to me, I'll start it, but Brenda will probably say a lot more than I am as the head up here and with the Amgen. It's not even a question. Yes, we are by far, Puerto Rico's exports of around $14 billion a year dwarf that of the nearest closest state. Second behind us, I believe, is Indiana, and I think they're in the $6 to $7 billion range in terms of their exports. So we export more than any other place in the United States by far. We still have the highest concentration of pharmaceutical manufacturers per square mile of anywhere in the world. And so while it's not what it might have been, during the height of 936, we're still a major player. And I think many times for those who were here during that zone, they're like, oh, pharma's not what it used to be. May not be, but it's still by far, I would say, one of the strongest market from just a pure numbers perspective in the country. And I think what we're seeing now with COVID and the opportunities that are emerging because of that, we've got an opportunity to play in a different kind of way than we did before. One of the things that I think is going to be critical moving forward is that we build on the past without dwelling in it. So we've got this rich history, but as things, new technologies emerge, my colleague will probably talk about the 5G labs and all this sort of thing. There are opportunities for Puerto Rico to even reinvent itself within the pharma sector. Brenda?
I think it's frozen again.
No worries. Other questions?
Okay, you both spoke about having Congress and the White House and talking more to them lately. I wanted to know, how does that change to the Biden administration, change reshoring to Puerto Rico, if at all?
I mean, I think it's really early in the administration, so I don't want to be overly aggressive in terms of commitments, but I will say this, they have already been very open to conversations. The Buy America stuff, which was released by Biden administration last week, prominently featured Puerto Rico as part of the solution. And our ongoing conversations with them make us think that there is going to be a continuation of a lot of the conversations that we had in the past. Hopefully we can actually kind of push those things over from being just conversations to, in an ideal world, there are 2 or 3 things I think we want to see happen. One is we need the air transshipment cargo waiver to be extended beyond the 2 years. That's absolutely vitally important. Number 2 is we need federal investment in significant infrastructure here on the island, because while we can attract private firms, we do think that with the federal investment tied to the reshoring efforts, it'll really accelerate that on a significant level. And then I think the third piece of the conversation with the feds is really around kind of what are assets, what are opportunities that can actually be game changers for the island and really shore up national security interests for the U.S. Because we know that the question of transshipment, or the question rather of logistics related to the COVID vaccine and therapeutics, is a national security concern. And we think, we need to have a deeper conversation about what that national security concern is and how Puerto Rico can be the answer to it.
That's great. Brenda, if you want to add something, we were talking about, I don't know if you're back, or I think she froze again. She's frozen again.
No worries.
Okay, with regards to Brenda's back. Okay, so with regards now to the government in Puerto Rico, are the incentives Puerto Rico offers now competitive?
Brenda, please.
Right now we have a lot of incentive, and
She's breaking up.
It looks like she may have frozen again.
Yeah, she's breaking up.
Yeah, so you may want to take your video off to conserve.
Yeah, if you want, I think that'd be better. Or let me see if I can take it off mine, and then that way she can have that.
Maybe if you try now, maybe it may work more.
Let's see.
Brenda, do you want to try again?
Yeah, I was telling you that in terms of incentive, this is not just about taxes. This is about the whole business environment, no? And how we can put the ecosystem to work to support solutions that can onshore in U.S. jobs here in the U.S. in Puerto Rico.
I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I think there's a few things here. One is, and she went right al grano, como dicen, ¿verdad? She went straight to the point, which is, while incentives are vitally important, there is a whole array of factors around the competitiveness of the pharmaceutical sector in Puerto Rico. And I would argue that our incentives are competitive with the rest of the world. Now, I'm not saying we don't need more, but what I'm saying is that what we've got is enough to be competitive. But there are other pieces of the puzzle where we probably need to spend additional time, additional efforts in terms of investing to make us optimally competitive. And I think probably of those other things, I would say, on the talent front, we're great, especially with young talent. But I think on the infrastructure piece, we've got to make significant investments in order for us to compete with other markets that are making large investments in infrastructure to kind of facilitate and expedite the ability to be able to get goods from one place to the other.
In agreement. Definitely.
Okay. So now for the question that everyone wants to ask is, how can members of MCA and people that are visiting on this chat and seminar today, how can they engage with Invest Puerto Rico to access the different opportunities that you offer?
So there's a few things. One is, at the end of the day, we are trying to build deeper ties with industry. And a part of that is we need to understand what's working and what isn't working. And that's from a couple of perspectives. What's working in terms of your business? Are there business hurdles that are not perhaps singular to your company, but others may be facing in terms of how they do business in Puerto Rico that need to be addressed? I mean, for example, we know that permits tends to be a challenge, for example, and those are things that we know. But I would argue, or I would suspect, that there are probably some very specific industry challenges that may not have risen to the fore and may be able to be answered by the government or nonprofit sector, but more likely than not, it's going to be some partnership of government and private sector to answer it. We need to know what those challenges are from your perspective. The other thing that we need to know is how you're winning. Why is your business here in Puerto Rico? What's your commitment to Puerto Rico over time? Because if we understand that gives us a powerful tool. While I think I'm pretty good at what I do. I can go sell. I can sell water to somebody, a drowning man, as my mother would say. But at the end of the day, everything that I say is discounted by the private sector when I'm out selling, because it's my job. And while I can get it a lot of ways, there's nothing more powerful than being able to say, oh, I've got Brenda Torres from Amgen, and she's going to tell you why they're here in Puerto Rico and what they're doing. Or I've got, someone else. I don't want to start dropping names, but if business leadership here in Puerto Rico is willing to go mano a mano con nosotros, if they're willing to go hand in hand with us to sell, we'll be a lot more successful, because companies need to hear not only, well, no, we're not the size that we might have been 15, 20 years ago, but we're still bigger than everybody else. And the companies that are here are doing well. They need to hear that from you. So we want your partnership in that. And our final comments as it relates to that question is this. My email is rmiller, that's RMILLER @investpr.org. And my information is in the presentation, it's on the site, but reach out to us. We are trying to figure out how do we create the kind of partnerships so that when we speak about what Puerto Rico has to offer, it's not just about a paid spokesperson saying this, it's industry leading the way. We will not be successful, and by we, I mean Invest Puerto Rico. And then number two, Puerto Rico will not be successful if it's left in the hands of Invest Puerto Rico and government without you. We need the private sector to lead on this and be aggressive about where we need to go.
That's great. That's a great answer.
Thank you.
I think you are Boricua.
De alma.
De alma, yeah. I think so.
Thank you so much.
All right. So does anyone else have any questions? Roderick, anything else that you want to add? Brenda?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and let's keep in touch. Let's continue working together.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sounds like a plan.
Bye.
All right. Well, thank you, Roderick. We're going to move on to Gail now. If you want to stay around, you're more than welcome.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Our next speaker, it's Gail Nolan. She's the Chief Strategy Officer for Invest Puerto Rico. She's a nationally recognized expert in disaster recovery, economic strategy development, sector targeted economic development strategies, economic public-private partnership strategies, university engagement, and grant program administration. She brings over 35 years of experience in economic development, tourism, marketing, and promotion. High-impact initiatives spearheaded by Nolan include her role as the chair of Economic Subcommittee for the Governor of Wisconsin's Emergency Task Force and on the Wisconsin Emergency Strategy Team, where she developed recovery projects to mitigate economic damage from disasters that impacted critical infrastructure. She effectively managed a portfolio of over $250 million in community development block grant disaster recovery, or CDBG-DR, funding, and over $50 million in economic development administration funding. Gail is a certified economic professional recognized by the International Economic Development Council. Please welcome Ms. Gail Nolan. Gail, are you here?
I am.
There you are.
Yes. Thank you so much.
It's great to meet you.
Very, very nice to meet you. And so I'm kind of giving the second half of Rod's presentation. Do you need me to do a screen share, or do you have the second presentation?
No, you go ahead and you can do it.
Okay, great. And so I really appreciated the last question about what can people at MCA do to help interface with Invest Puerto Rico, because I think I'm going to get into a little more detail regarding that. Let me see, I'm just going to move my screen here a little bit. Regarding some
I'm sorry that I interrupted you. I'm going to take the video so you have better access to the presentation, and it's your show.
Great. All right. Thank you. Very good.
Sure.
And so Invest Puerto Rico, as Rod had mentioned, Invest Puerto Rico, we have been very keenly aware of how important it is to have the voice of industry as we move forward in all of our initiatives. We're also really aware, even though we've kind of segmented these presentations as different industries, really it's the interface of all of these industries that make the difference in terms of creating a product, and the product being the island of Puerto Rico from the viewpoint of businesses that might move here, but creating a product that really serves their needs so that they're successful here. And for some, it requires really honing a messaging around what we have, what our assets are, and then how our assets work together in order to be able to serve either a specific type of company or even specific lines within a company. And so we need to know those things in order to be able to really be effective. And so one of the objectives we did with our air transshipment committee is, after that waiver was made back in April, there was quite literally a ticking clock on that initiative of 2 years, in which time we had to prove that the island was going to be able to utilize that waiver in a way that added economic value, not just to Puerto Rico, but to the United States as a whole. And so we convened a committee, as Rod had said, that had partners from the logistics industry, from the pharmaceutical and medical device industries, PRMA, PIA, as well as governmental officials, both locally and federally, so that together we could all identify where the needs were, how to message it appropriately, to work together collaboratively, so that frequently, as we talk about some of these issues, there is somebody who's on our call, and I have to say we have a weekly call regarding transshipment. There's probably about 40 high-profile, very influential members of this committee. Most of them show up on a weekly basis, and so collectively, there's a network and a capability of getting things done much more rapidly. And going back to that question also on incentives, one of the things as we're working, in fact, with PIA to do a comparative analysis on competitiveness on the island of Puerto Rico in the pharmaceutical industry compared to our competitors in the US and our competitors globally, one of the things that has really surfaced is that ability to work collaboratively, so that when prospects come to the island, we can put them in front of all the people that they need in order to be successful in their endeavor. And so the Transshipment Committee has been kind of our first foray into that collaboration structure. So what I really am going to highlight in this in this discussion is I've got a PowerPoint that goes through some of the materials, the collateral that we've put together. And this is one way in which we designed this collateral to represent the voice of things that were important to industry, but also as a tool for industry, because we're not singularly doing economic development or business outreach. You are all doing business development and business outreach as well. And I think a lot of the collateral pieces, a lot of the marketing pieces that we're putting together are going to be helpful for you to be able to reference to your clients as you're making those, as you're having those conversations, so that you can have really solid data and information to be able to validate the things that you speak. So if you say, yes, as a company, we have logistics capability, you can point them to our site to understand that, in fact, we don't just have logistics capabilities. We have two of the top two airports from a perspective of efficiency on the East Coast. And so it just helps to reinforce that kind of messaging. Basically, the slide deck that we've put together these are screenshots from our actual website that have these collateral materials. And so the way we put together information is we put together a one-page sell sheet that you can click on that's embedded within our webpage. You can click on that, embed that in an email or attach it to an email and send it to people, or you can just send them the link to this whole website where they can access that information. The first.
Gail, this is Tommy. Could you put the slideshow button so the whole screen goes down there? Yeah.
I was trying to figure that out, and I wasn't quite sure how to. If somebody could just give
if you put it on
in the bottom right, there's a presentation button. Go down. There you go. Around there to the left now. To the left. Right.
There you go.
That's
perfect.
There you go.
See, things always work better with collaboration.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so going through the slides, so again, we identify Puerto Rico and its important geographical position, which really opens up, and I think we've all been aware in the last year with shipment challenges around the COVID and COVID vaccines and other supply chain issues, how important proximity is. And so Puerto Rico is really well positioned, especially in this hemisphere, to be able to deliver a lot of the products that we've relied on historically with different kinds of shipping parameters. And so we're really wanting to point that out. The effectiveness of supply lines, is a really important element. And on this particular page, we identify very specifically what the new DOT waiver allows, because it's very confusing. A lot of it is written in very legal terms, but we've really simplified it. And then to complement this particular piece in our webpage, we also have a one-page fact sheet that includes questions that companies or partners of yours might ask. And so it provides you with very specific and detailed answers. We look at it from the perspective of airlines. Why is that transshipment waiver important to airlines to add new routes, as Rod had mentioned with Virgin Atlantic, and recognizing that normally airlines are driven by passenger count decisions. But because of COVID, there's been this huge flip to recognizing that cargo, in complement to passengers, is really an important element of cost effectiveness for the airlines. So we want to make that case as COVID lifts, that Puerto Rico has both of those together. And so it makes a lot more sense from an airline perspective to have Puerto Rico as a hub, because you can support either of those sides of the revenue requirements. We identify some very high level data points that you can give kind of your elevator pitch in terms of why Puerto Rico logistics is really an important element to decision making for businesses. We talk about the foreign trade zones, industry reshoring, U.S. jurisdiction, assets, and that priority to reshore that again has even gotten stronger in the last month. We frame and map all the different regional airports, seaports, international hubs, and highways. One thing that isn't on this that we are actually working on now also is marine highways. So transporting goods around the exterior of the island, the perimeter of the island. And it's important to think of the island not just as individual ports or airports, but really the island is one hub. And so we're looking at how we maximize that hub from an efficiency perspective, both efficiency in terms of efficiency in how we serve business, but also efficiency in managing public resources to make sure that it all works together for the greatest good from an economic perspective. This is where we give some airport profiles of each one of the airports to talk about what their capacity is. We actually have a greater study that's available on our website that UPR did in terms of very granular data on capacity of each of the airports and where there's opportunities in that. So I would welcome people to look at that. This is what I was citing earlier, where BQN and SJU are actually the two most efficient, and I'm going to see if I can move this down a little bit, are the most efficient airports on the East Coast, ranked number 1 and number 2 by a very specific methodology that they use to rank airport efficiency. And so I think the island should be very proud of that. And all of you should be aware of that, because those are points, because of the fact that we're an island, those are selling points for everybody's business development efforts. We talk a lot about the foreign trade zones. Puerto Rico has the largest non-contiguous foreign trade zone in the US. And again, that's a big deal, and a big deal with the new objectives around the Buy America program, because there may actually be some, I don't believe that they've come out with guidance yet. There's some talk about them changing the percentage of goods, the percentage of value added in goods in order to be qualified as American made. And so there could be a tremendous advantage for Puerto Rico in terms of its position in the Caribbean basin and juxtaposition to South America, to be able to recapture some manufacturing or final processing to get that, to get a product over the requirements to be made in America. Again, we talk a little bit about the reshoring opportunity. This is actually a snapshot from our one pager that really just has very high level numbers that we think are very important in terms of how you sell and why we sell, the logistics capabilities and the bioscience capabilities on the island, why that's a global differentiator. And then we look at if the Stevens Act were to be granted as well to the island of Puerto Rico, which is an entirely different thing than what the waiver allows. The waiver is an administrative waiver. This particular, the Stevens Act actually has a much greater capability attached to it, and we're actually hopeful that that could be in the future. But these numbers just show you what the economic impact of that kind of decision would be for the island of Puerto Rico. And we keep saying it's not just for the island of Puerto Rico. Again, the island of Puerto Rico has been serving the U.S. as a significant pharmaceutical and medical device driver for 50 years. And there's just this recognition now of that role. And so Puerto Rico is happy to step up to the plate as the country is in need. And I think that's really important, is reinforcing Puerto Rico's role and reinforcing Puerto Rico's capabilities is really going to help the entire U.S. to secure its supply chain borders. And so very important to understand that. And then again, going back to, this is a great way of growing tourism opportunities. we're working very closely with Discover Puerto Rico to make sure that we're quantifying and qualifying their side of the equation, and that in all of our efforts, we work seamlessly to show that from a business perspective, being able to move cargo and people is equally important. And so the plane doesn't know whether it's a tourist or a business passenger. They know that they're passengers. And so the more capabilities that people have to be able to move, the more capabilities that cargo has to move as well. They're completely entwined with each other. This is our a large snapshot of our transshipment hub. It's a one pager. And again, it just gives you an idea of the way that we've isolated the different information and made it much easier to digest, and made them very shareable so that you can use these as part of your efforts as you do your business development. And then this is, again, on the bottom of our sell sheet and our webpage. We've really narrowed it down to kind of those pillars that Rod had talked about in terms of the reasons why companies make decisions to come to Puerto Rico, and the items that are important to them in terms of what would make Puerto Rico attractive. It's not always incentives. A lot of times it's just that they know that the jurisdiction or the location that they're going to can help them be successful. And again, that's our objective, is to make sure that we've created an environment that's very successful for the businesses. So going back now to Rod's final question, and what can MCA do, is you can share our materials. You can provide us input where you think that materials can be improved. You can participate in some of our committees. We have committees for transshipment. We have another committee for energy, and to discuss energy challenges for businesses and some of the changes and some of the innovations that are occurring on the island. And we have a committee around technology and advanced technology solutions that will be game changers. And so with that final committee, I'm just going to go into, and I don't have a PowerPoint for this, but an additional discussion on, Rod had kind of mentioned a project we're working on for a 5G test bed. And the reason that that's important is Rod kind of went into some of the history of the pharmaceutical industry on the island, and talked a little bit about 936 and how that created incentives that then helped the island to lower some of the cost profiles of manufacturing products on the island. And we don't have that advantage anymore, that particular advantage. And so we really have to look at other ways to support the cost effectiveness of doing business on the island of Puerto Rico. So while reshoring is something that we know is a wave that we're certainly going to ride to its fullest extent right now, people's memories are short, and they're not going to remember the challenges of 2020 indefinitely. And so we have to make sure that we find other ways to continue to be very effective and cost efficient in how the island can serve these different companies. And so one of the things that we've negotiated and we've secured a partnership is that Puerto Rico is going to be one of 4 hubs around the country that's associated with the National Spectrum Consortium that does research around how 5G interfaces with other spectrums, other technologies along different spectrums. So like 0G, which would be sensors, all the way up to 5G, and then how it's most cost effectively interfaced with industry and logistics. And each of these 4 units, and I call them the North, South, East, and West network. The 5G core is in Texas A&M, and we'll be plugging in directly to that core within the month. That center at Texas A&M is going to focus on public safety, using 5G for public safety. The other partner is Purdue up in Indianapolis. They're focused on 5G and applications in industry and prototyping. So kind of the engineering side of manufacturing. The third hub will be at University of Hawaii, and that'll focus on military applications of 5G and public safety. And then Puerto Rico will be focused very specifically on research and development of 5G around cost-effective solutions for manufacturing and logistics. And so when you think of the way that that network of 4 entities, it literally puts a physical border around the US, and that 5G testbed and its affiliation with the National Spectrum Consortium, who's putting it together on behalf of the DoD, is to really create a secure border around the US, around logistics and supply chains, because all of those 5G and the different spectrum interfaces require a lot of cybersecurity where that exchange takes place. And so I know a lot of you are very heavily involved on the technology and the IoT side, where your equipment interfaces and manage and works in concert with other equipment within a facility. And so these are really important tools that we'll be able to put in place on the island to say that we are the singular place where that research and development is being done. Really puts us kind of in line of what Puerto Rico did, or I'm sorry, what Singapore did about 15 years ago in terms of really enhancing their technology capabilities as a region to support the companies that used that region for some of their manufacturing. So we're very eager to apply all of those things. So I'm sorry, I know that was a lot of talking, and I wish I had somebody to have a little additional dialogue with here, but I wanted to try and open up the floor to questions on some of those things. And then maybe, hopefully there'll be a little time, and maybe I'll have some questions for the audience as well, because we always want to have a two-way dialogue.
Okay, so we have a few questions here. We'll start with, what airports compete now as logistic hubs, and why would this change in Puerto Rico? Or why would it change to Puerto Rico?
So when you talk about logistics hubs, it kind of depends on the type of products. So
Okay.
if we're looking at life science products, we would, there's significant hubs in Brussels, for example, Switzerland. Singapore has a large hub, Edmonton. In the US, Miami has a significant hub. And one of the challenges around Miami's hub is they do a great job, and they're an awesome airport, and we would love to work with them because they're landlocked as a facility. And so we feel like we could actually, I sometimes laughingly say, we're their expansion plan.
Okay.
Because we could support what goes in. We'd rather have goods going through hubs that are US based, because our biggest competitors for hubs in the pharmaceutical or medical device industry are, Costa Rica, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. So we'd really much rather partner with Miami and have there be a US hub. And I think it was after that question.
I wanted to see which were the hubs that competed with us.
Right. So I think I answered that.
Yes, you did. When Alaska got the waiver in the 90s, how did they take advantage of this?
And so they put forward a really structured program that included all of the elements. In fact, I'm going to say that was our first thing, is we went through and we looked at every step that Alaska took in order to be able to really maximize their waiver. In DC, we actually worked with the same law firm that had helped them get their waiver. So we really understood a lot of the processes that they went through. Again, it's a little bit of a different, they have the Stevens Act, which is different than the waiver we have. And so there's been a slight bit of difference. The other really big difference is Alaska had some oil revenues that they were able to create an incentive program with. We don't have that. What Alaska didn't have, though, and I think this is going to be the differentiator for why this is going to be successful in Puerto Rico without incentives, is they didn't have an industry. So there was no industry based in no industry based in Alaska that they could tie into, where Puerto Rico already has that industry base and partnerships with all of these companies. And it's just a matter of expanding their capabilities by getting them to understand what this waiver means to them in terms of new ability to shift passengers and cargo.
Yeah, we have similar problems in the construction industry where there's no stock of materials for construction. So we're suffering the same damages for tons of time, and now different taxes on stock here. So there's really, and it was a problem after Maria, and it still hasn't changed. So we hopefully it'll change at some point. Going into,
I could just add to that, there
Yeah.
actually was just a story in the last 2 weeks where, and this is part of where aggregating a message is a really important thing, and then knowing where to deliver that message. Because there was a report of that China is so eager to have empty containers to ship goods, to export goods into other countries as part of their recovery strategy, that empty containers are being shipped to Puerto Rico and not bringing goods from the US to places like Puerto Rico. So it's really an interesting thing to look at. You know, this is why understanding these global networks is really, and being part of global networks is an important negotiating term.
and on that note, what construction opportunities do you think will come out of this effort from Invest?
Sure. So we've already, you may have seen, we're very excited. We just had an announcement of 2 companies that are coming to the
Yes.
island.
Congratulations.
They
It came out this morning.
Yes, thank you. And they're the unique thing about that is, number one, those are not, they're not commodity driven companies. They're companies that do very high technology solutions. And so that's one exciting part. I think the other part that about that is that the island of Puerto Rico has a lot of infrastructure in terms of really stable, quickly fillable facilities. There's a lot of cement structures, and cement structures are really strong. And, you know, a lot of places around the country, other places, you know, they'll put up a pole building and that's kind of the exterior. And so those buildings age. I think buildings age better on the island, with the exception of the mechanicals and some of those elements. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to quickly bring companies where it would take maybe a 3-year timeline in other areas of the country. Puerto Rico could do a lot of these within 6 months to 18 months, which is very exciting. And you're probably, again, I think I'm preaching to the choir with this, but there's new technologies around, you know, even like, I'm going to call it plug and play, but it's not plug and play. They're actual containers that you can, that are CGMP certified facilities that could be put inside another shell of a building and put together very quickly. So again, I think that's important, and that's what's going to be the benefit on the island of Puerto Rico. And I think from a builder's perspective, and more importantly, from a mechanical contractors association, that's where the opportunity is. And we would like to work with you, because I talked with a major pharmaceutical company, and they talked about another jurisdiction that courted them and actually earned a new facility. And they said it was because when we landed at the airport, all of the people we needed to talk to were there together in the room with us. So we were able to talk to the contractors and the permitters and the you know, real estate agents, and that was the differentiator for why we chose that. Is we said, okay, well, they put this all together. And so that's our goal on the island, is to put together these kind of crack teams of people that when we host a company, they'll know that they already have the competent, incredible people at the table.
Well, I think I saw on one of your slides that it said that in Puerto Rico, there's 6 times more STEM graduates or STEM students than in other places in the United States. So I
Right.
think that would be a big help for any other company that comes into Puerto Rico to do business here. I mean, we have it all in-house, so to speak.
Right. The academic, the educational assets on the island are tremendous. The island really churns out talent that is enviable. Sixth highest concentration in the world of scientists and engineers. I think 8 times the number of pharmaceutical experts, over 5 times the number of medical device experts. The challenge is we grow and train a lot of talent and then they leave. And so
Yeah.
part of the objective, as Rod has said, is to bring that talent back. And again, all of this comes through messaging so that everyone is aligned on the same message, and that it's hopeful to people to know that they can come back to the island. And I think as Brenda had said, I've never seen a region in the country in working in many different regions where people were so desiring to come back to that region and identify themselves with that their place of origin is going to be their place of destination.
Yeah, well, Rod is now Boricua, so I mean, we adopted him, so.
Right. I'm hopeful. So I think it's an important thing to remember, and it's an important thing for us to frame. And so we actually are putting together also on our webpage. I would really encourage everyone on this to really look through all of our different web pages, help us make it better, but also use them as tools, because I think that's, and there's going to be a talent side on that, where when companies look at numbers, they run analytics on the available workforce, for example, on the island of Puerto Rico, which is very population based. And so if you look at a 10-year trending, it doesn't look good on the island. And so what we're putting together is what we're calling our secondary available workforce. And that's all the Puerto Ricans who have left, who have been highly trained, highly skilled, and have left and want to come back. So we're creating a portal where they can actually register what their skill sets are, and what their capabilities are, so that becomes a documented resource for companies that are eager to come back. So we can kind of be like a matchmaking list.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see over here. Let me see another question. Hold on one second.
I do want to also give a shout out. Tommy Kersey is always a member and a participant in our transshipment meetings. He does a great job of communicating and identifying where the intersections between the two organizations are. So it's been really wonderful to work with him, and I think I'm eager for. I think we've already had some small gains. In the next year, we have some gains. So.
Yeah, I'm very proud, and I'm the first testimonial of excellence that you direct that committee, and we are people say what they're doing there. Well, there are a lot of refrigerated buildings that need to be done in Puerto Rico, and we are working with that, and we're supporting the transshipment committee. But as I'm in the inside, and the people that are there are the top guys, the top guns of the industry. It's incredible how the government and the private sector has gone together under your leadership, and we do a strictly 60-minute meeting every Friday morning, and we have accomplished a lot. So kudos for you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's a great partnership.
Well, since Tommy brings the government into this, I have a question here that says, what is lacking from the government in terms of money and investment to get this going? Sounds like still on the planning stage, but a little bit further.
So I think when we have been gathering as a committee, what we tried to do is we segregated, first of all, we just created a big list of all the things that could potentially be done. And then we segregated them to things that could be done within 2 years so that they'd be completed by the time the waiver reauthorization came due. And then the second was that we looked at anything that could be started within 2 years and continued after that. And then the third was anything that was long range, so like 5 years or longer. So that was the first cut. And then we divided it into infrastructure, capacity building, and messaging and outreach. And so we've been able to organize a lot of these things in a very comprehensive way. And a lot of these different things have dependencies. And the structure of our committee, and we call ourselves the working team, you know, we're a roll up our sleeves team that are doing a lot of this work. And then there was a complementary committee that the governor had convened that were all the governmental department leaders. And so by us as an industry collective being able to identify all of the things that needed to be done and the dependencies, so in other words, the order in which those things needed to be done, we were able to provide that as a voice to the government, to the central government, to be able to understand and kind of tackle things one at a time. Now with the changeover of 2 administrations, there's kind of a period of re-education that needs to take place both on a federal level and to some level with some of the new local leadership. Although I'm going to say most of the leadership on the island recognize how incredibly important this is, and they've been tremendous champions of getting things to move forward. It's just understanding kind of the opportunity cost of what needs to come first. And if you choose one thing, you're automatically not choosing something else. So I think we have a really good plan, and we've had some really good results on our plan. And now is, it's not inappropriate to say the first year is your planning year and the second year is your deployment year. And so I think we've got a great plan for us to deploy. And I think we've got a very supportive government to be able to do that in. And so we've got big plans, and we look forward to coming back next year and telling you all the successes.
I hope so. I hope so. I want to thank you, Gail, for being with us. I think Michael came in. If you want to add anything else, I'm just so happy that you were with us. And I read your bio and I was very impressed.
Oh, well, thank you. I actually, as you were reading it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's too long. We've got to.
It's so great. It's so great.
Oh, so
you have to do it. You have to do it.
But thank you so much. And thanks for this opportunity. And again, thank you, Tommy. And for all of the members, please feel free to reach out. I do want to also give my my email for anyone who wants to be on any of our committees. If anything piqued your interest, my email is the same formula, gnolan@investpuertorico.org. So thanks so much.
You'll be hearing from me.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so we're going to be moving on to our next speaker, Mr. Michael Gay, who is, Michael, are you here?
Yes, I was unmuted. Excuse me. Yes, I am
No,
here.
that's all right. I just wanted to make sure that your connection was working out fine. Well, Michael Gay is the Chief Business Development Officer for Invest Puerto Rico. He's a seasoned economic professional with regional, domestic, and international experience in business attraction, expansion, and retention. He comes to Invest Puerto Rico with over 30 years leading various business development efforts across Wisconsin. Career highlights include leading sector development for the city of Madison, encompassing manufacturing, biosciences, information and communications technology, and healthcare, helping the University of Wisconsin system become more entrepreneurial, and creating the Office of Business Resources to boost the city's economic and business development functions. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Public and Environmental Administration and a Master in Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Wisconsin. He's a Badger, as well as
Yes,
as well as thesis research at La Universidad de los Andes and Pontificia Universidad Javeriana in Bogota, Colombia. Please welcome Mr. Michael Gay, who will be speaking about the Site Selection 101 and real estate for FDI. Thank you and welcome, Michael.
Welcome. Do I put my PowerPoint up, or are you driving it?
No, you go ahead. I don't have it.
Okay, so
I'm just gonna stop share and you go ahead, and I'm gonna mute my screen and mute my video, but I'll be
All right, can you see site selection 101 in big letters?
Yes,
Yes,
we can
sir.
see it.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My first interface with the Mechanical Contractors Association was kind of the first event that I attended on the island last June. I apologize, it's been so long since we connected live, but it's great to be here and talk about what we're working on, particularly regarding site selection, attraction, foreign direct investment. Excuse me. This is me. We already talked about that. I want to talk about a couple things. One is I got off the plane and the next day was quarantine. So everything that I planned to do in person, both on the island and around the world, my vision, so to speak, was put on hold because of COVID. And it's been very difficult. That said, we have pivoted to the times, to the COVID times, and we have been working on attending events globally, virtually. We've also been using artificial intelligence to do lead generation, since having lead generation contract, attending events across the globe is not possible. So we haven't sat on our laurels. We haven't waited for opportunities. We have been aggressively seeking them in the current environment, the new environment, and doing our best. So there's 4 things on this lead generation slide that I want to highlight. Networks, those are keenly important. Multipliers and C-level executives in government of all levels are kind of the networks that we have where we get some leads. Brokers, developers, and investors on the island as well as off. I will say that 50% of the pipeline that we have right now for projects that could happen in the next 6 to 9 months have come to us from investors, not from the C-suite itself, but from the investors in those companies that are looking strongly at Puerto Rico. Multipliers are professional service firms, most importantly, financiers, accountants, CPAs, lawyers. They work with a lot of companies. And we have connections with multipliers both on and off the island again. I will say that I haven't found too many of the big accounting firms on the mainland that know much about Puerto Rico's Act 60 and the incentives and the opportunities here as the offices that are actually on the island. Kudos to the on-island people, but we have work to do on the mainland in the United States with these multipliers, these big accounting firms and attorneys and whatnot. Government of all levels are sources. A lot of companies, can contact all municipal governments. They can contact the island government itself here. And we've gotten several over the last year that have come in through Secretary LeBoy or some of his other staff. Victor Merced included that have shared leads with us. There's a strict delineation between DDEC and us. They're in charge of business retention and expansion, so helping companies on the island, and we're in charge of attraction, so bringing new companies, new startups, new investors, new inventors, and actually the diaspora that have left, that want to come back to the island. So we do events both live and virtual, and we hope to do live events starting later this fall. When travel plans are facilitated and my staff are vaccinated and things like that happen. That said, we have attended all sorts of virtual events. Most important to this is we attended and we met with 55 companies. The announcement that you saw yesterday is sort of a direct result of that event. Not because we identified the prospects at it, but we started targeting gene cell therapy companies, which is something we haven't done on the island before, and we don't have. And that is the future of medicine. We will always need, the pharmaceuticals that are manufactured on the island. I don't see them going away, but medicine and healthcare in particular is pivoting. And we have to pivot with them as well and be embracing of the gene cell therapy technologies that are out there. So we focused on those. We actually have one organization on the island that's here that is, their staff are here, but their business is still overseas. And when they are ready to launch and bring in investors and maybe go public, once they finish their phase 3 clinical trials, they're already on the island. And so that was a company that we met at Bio. The announcement yesterday, we met, we got that lead directly, the gene cell therapy one, directly after the federal capacity tour. So all of this branding and marketing and excuse me, education is starting to pay off, and we're getting leads from it. But we will go to Medica and various other things, and I'll showcase those later in my conversation. Other events that are very important to this organization. The diaspora is huge. It's growing. I can't tell you the number of LinkedIn emails, messages, requests that I've gotten following the 2 major announcements yesterday. And there's a lot of people that are interested in finding out more about those opportunities and figuring out if they can plug in. Workforce is a huge issue, very key to the success of these companies that we announced yesterday. We have to pipeline it, grow it, farm it, graduate it, retain it, and get some of the diaspora to come back to meet all of the hiring needs that those 2 companies will have, and also other companies too. And let me remind you, even though we are working a lot on manufacturers of all different types, we also are focused on high-tech jobs that are in the information communications technology field, fintech, insurtech, professional services, and those are Class A office users. And they have a very different cybersecurity. All of those types of companies have very different skill set needs, and we have talent issues there. And we have real estate issues there as well. So it's not all manufacturing. I mentioned the multipliers and the relationships. We're constantly working on those. Existing pipeline and tools. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a pipeline today, which we didn't have back in March when I started. And these 2 companies announced yesterday are part of the pipeline, and we hope to have many more successes in the next 6 months. We had a contract for a lead generation service in Europe, and that obviously my passport isn't good there. So we're looking at that, repurposing that money to do other types of contracting from the mainland with other consultants. Also tools. Tools are artificial intelligence based. So there are many tools that profile the industry, and they profile what's happening in the industry. We monitor those. So you might have heard of Gazelle and BioCentry and Sales Navigator inside of LinkedIn and PitchBook. We have subscriptions to all of those. And that way we can do a ton of research and really start to hone in on those companies that we want to go after and know who the leaders are, who the investors are, what other types of companies they've invested in, what their history is, what their hotspots are. Do they have connections to Puerto Rico? Did they graduate from Puerto Rico? You know, and we're working very strongly on those types of things, and really having the ability to turn a cold call into a warm call when we reach out to them. International partners, I put I&E ecosystem there because I want to make sure that our inventors here, our entrepreneurs, our spaces, accelerators, co-working spaces are connected globally. And by doing this, it's a way for those technology companies to find opportunities overseas, grow their market, but also to attract other companies here as well. So when we deal with foreign direct investment, obviously we need a place to put a company, and access to marketable properties is key. So we spend a lot of time working with DDEC and Pridco on trying to understand those assets and which ones have good bones, good structures, good shells, which show better. There are 2 types of Pridco properties. There are the standard ones that are vacant, and then there's Pridco reserve properties that are vacant and reserved. Some of these properties, unfortunately, are reserved for an extended period of time, and we want to figure out how, creative ways to get these back on the market, because some of them are in some communities vacant for many years, and that does the community no good. So we're working with Pridco right now on creative solutions for that. Municipally owned properties is another market. And so we're reaching out to mayors and economic development professionals on city staff and municipalities to see if they have sites and buildings that they control that could be positioned for foreign direct investment. And obviously the private sector, the real estate brokers and agents. It is very important that we establish relationships with agencies that have exclusive listings and that can give us the information that foreign direct investment prospects demand in order for us to process site searches. The breadth of our real estate portfolio is getting bigger by the day. We are screening properties. We are going and visiting them. We are walking through them. We are photographing them. We are getting much more accurate information, and we are ultimately marketing those that we can prove that have, you know, legitimate site control, that have the pricing information and whatnot on them. We cover multiple industry sectors, manufacturing, where from gene cell therapy spaces. Those are all very key. But we also are looking at Class A office, as I mentioned before. We also are trying to make sure that the real estate portfolio that we start to market more and more has the entire island in mind. It's not just Greater San Juan or just those areas adjacent to airports, international airports, things like that. Another thing I wanted to mention is we have a lot of projects that we identify and that come to the island that are looking here that need capital. And we have a lot of investors on the island, hedge funds, private equity, opportunity zone funds, VC, all types, even individuals of high net worth. They tend to be very interested in real estate. They are more interested in investing in the real estate that companies will occupy than actually in the companies themselves. So we are creating an investor platform, and we hope to release this in the next couple months. My goal is by April 1st is to put a platform. It's basically a match.com for companies that are investment agencies, and then the other side of the equation are projects, and they can be startups, they can be real estate development, they can be pitch decks from bioscience companies, they can be all sorts of things. And this is our way of connecting projects looking for capital and investors looking for investment opportunities. The other thing that could be on there is renewable energy projects. We're constantly trying to reinforce the renewable energy vision of the island and to be off the grid, 100% by 2050. And so micro stations, rooftop solar and things like that are all being considered, and we're trying to match those companies that have that expertise with the prospects that we're siting on the island, so that we have better, power redundancy and resiliency. These are some of the issues that we really focus on for sites and buildings. And sites, I mean greenfield sites that are available for new construction, and buildings are existing structures. We focus on exclusively listed, so finding out who actually has the listing of that property. I get a lot of properties put in front of me that are not officially hired by the owner to represent them, and I have to make sure that when I put properties in front of foreign direct investment prospects, that I have the right listing agent there. Lease rate, sale price, and a complete sell sheet for that property is key. I can't tell you the number of times I've gotten really good profiles of properties, but there's no sale price or lease rates on them. That once again disqualifies us for responding to RFIs if we don't have complete information, and financial information is just as important as ceiling heights, number of docks, and all sorts of other specifications for companies. Confirmed property ownership, I mentioned. Foreign direct investment readiness is huge as well. And by that, I mean communities. This is an island of relationships, and everybody here knows everybody else. And when a local company is looking at a property in a various community, they know what to do. But foreign direct investment prospects, RFIs, requests for information, or RFPs, requests for proposals that we receive from site selectors, are very, very specific. And a lot of them won't look at greenfield sites unless they're certified, which means completely profiled with a third party that documents all of the infrastructure, sewer, water, roads, curb and gutter, broadband capacity, elevated water storage, fire protection ratings, all of those things. They won't look at them if they don't have wetland delineations and floodplain delineations and all of that information. And I hope that when we work with communities and other private developers, that we can get to the point where we create our own gold shovel or certified buildings program. So we have our own third-party documentation and we can stay in front of these foreign direct investment prospects. I will say my experience in the United States prior to, in Wisconsin, prior to coming to Puerto Rico, has been that no European company looking at greenfield sites would look at anything other than certified sites or gold shovel sites. So they're since they're new to the United States, so to speak, they have very high standards. And that's something that we can achieve if we all collaborate and work together. And I'm working with a beginning project in Manatee now, which is the property adjacent to Romark, trying to get them moving in that direction. And we've been working with them on their sell sheet, and we're talking about other future opportunities to feature that building. And that's one of the most ready projects I've seen so far, and I'm looking for other ones like it. Property build out, quick startup alternatives. That is a quicker way when you're renovating an existing property. And, you know, for Cytoimmune, which was announced yesterday, it's unique because they need clean rooms to be doing some amazing things in gene cell therapy, curing cancer. And yet they're going inside the former Quest building in Toa Baja, which looks like a warehouse from the outside with an office building attached to it. But what they're using is unique technology, which is rather than building a CGMP facility, they're actually acquiring pods from GCON and equipping them with Cytivia technology, designing and everything. And when they ship here, these pods glue together, you know, they piece together, and all of a sudden within 3 weeks after arrival, you have an FDA certified clean room facility for creating, you know, gene cell therapy technologies that cure cancer. And so that was a really interesting technology play to fill in a warehouse building that we can do more of. And it was a really unique approach because they had a very, very quick timeline. And there are unique technologies like that evolving constantly. I just wanted to show you some of the events that we have going and tell you a little bit about them that are on our radar. We're going to be the featured country, featured island, featured you know, economic development organization for Select USA in Brazil. And Select USA is the foreign direct investment arm of the US government, and they have chapters in US commercial service offices all over around the world. Brazil has chosen to feature us in March, and you would be surprised, or maybe not, to know that there's a lot of Brazilian companies looking at Puerto Rico as the gateway to the United States market because their Spanish is better than their English. So that's exciting. And we're putting together a pitch deck, and we're going to have an hour in front of how many other companies that they have that sign up for this event in Brazil. So we will be featured there. We're going to also probably do other countries. So they call it Select USA single location seminars, or and we're looking at Western Europe and other parts of Latin America as well with the US Commercial Service and Select USA. We're going to be attending South by Southwest, which is all creative industries and techie industries. That's happening virtually in March as well. Hannover Messe is the largest advanced manufacturing conference on the planet that happens in Germany. That will be virtual. In May is Novogradak. And then in June, you can see we have a ton of other conferences that we're looking, that's when the conference season really starts to ramp up. Horasis Global is, I think it's Portuguese based, that'll be virtual. Select USA's Washington event, the main feature event, the biggest feature event for this country. There'll be 1,000 companies hopefully attending that if registration continues as normal, that are looking to invest in the United States. If this was obviously a live event, we would have a booth at the conference and be showcasing Puerto Rico. The Site Selectors Guild which is all of the 400 site selectors that we really target. They're site selectors scaled to some of the highest, best ranking ones in that group of 400. Bio International, Bio Asia, that's in June and July as well. And we had a lot of success last year and are looking forward to doing that again. Some of these things, these events take multiple touches. You don't get deals, in just one show. Yes, sometimes you do, but most of the time it takes multiple touches, multiple introductions, multiple meetings. Collision is another one. So there's several manufacturing, bioscience related events, which would be very important to the MCA here in the next couple months. I mentioned USA, Washington, D.C., and the single locations earlier. I mentioned those targets. Medica is one of the largest medical device conferences in the world, and that's scheduled to take place in Europe later this year. We will see if that's virtual or live. IATA, which is all regarding transportation logistics, which is tied to probably what Gail was talking about previously. We are also looking at on-island events. If there are events happening on the island that we can participate in, we've got an entire group of companies looking at coming here from Turkey, like 10 different companies. We're doing a virtual kind of FAM tour with JETRO, which is the Japanese Economic Development Organization, and they have 55,000 members and mostly manufacturers. We had them do a FAM tour last year. Obviously, we can't do it, so we're creating a virtual FAM tour, which is basically a sizzle, video about Puerto Rico, and it features bioscience heavily. And then the second part is a really strong conversation and video from Rod, our CEO. And we're open to other suggestions of major conferences attended by MCA. And I say that because if there's a conference that MCA thinks it's the most important conference for the organization, and it's in the mainland or it's in Latin America or Europe or something like that, I would love to have a conversation and brainstorm about an opportunity to partner with MCA and be in the booth with you and see if we can augment what you guys do or the companies that are there and help close some more deals and be more successful. These are the announcements that I had yesterday. 2 successful projects, and let me tell you that these are moving at light speed. We connected with them in September, and we have gotten very, very far in the last 4 months. Obviously, you saw the announcements: over 400 job creation, and probably almost 230 million in capital expenditure, private investment. We're working hard on various components regarding solar energy right now, regarding the talent pipeline, and we're working hard on the interface between local government and the companies as well. So meetings with the mayors in Toa Baja and Aguadilla. I want to thank everybody that's been involved, because doing what we've done with these 2 companies and getting them as far as we have in the last 4 months during COVID is taking a lot of work, and very impressive for everybody involved in Puerto Rico. We hope to have more announcements coming soon. Not every announcement is going to be, in the manufacturing industry. So I want to point that out, because we have multiple sectors that we're targeting, but lots, we're trying to achieve our goal of bringing in $500 million of new private investment and 7,500 jobs every year. It's very difficult to do during COVID, but we're not giving up easy. I want to tell you quickly about what we're doing. Is my office is obviously in Puerto Rico. I have a New York office, and I'm going to be opening a Silicon Valley office. I'm also going to have advisory based in those 2 offices that help us with lead gen impact in various economies on the mainland. And I am going to be exploring some of the opportunities in our industry sectors of significance in Illinois, Georgia, Florida, Texas, North Carolina, and Tennessee, because these are places that many companies in Chicago or companies in Silicon Valley or New York are looking at as alternative locations. We want them to make sure that Puerto Rico is on their mind as well. I'm also exploring the opportunity of having an RFP for some defense industry, aerospace and avionics related manufacturing on the island, since I can't use that capital for the lead generation contract in Europe as I originally intended. I want to do something else creative and pointed to Puerto Rico with that. We've been short-staffed, and happy to say that we're getting here in San Juan, and hopefully in 30 days we're going to have some additional staff online, 2 additional people. Like I mentioned before, we're spending a lot of time in the next year focusing on municipal mayors and their economic development staff. We want to have a strong partnership with them, just like we have with DDEC and PRIDCO. And then site selector outreach. The Site Selector Guild, Coordinate, those are 2 organizations of site selectors that bring us deals. I'm speaking in front of Colliers and CBRE New York and giving a presentation, kind of like a lunch and learn like I'm doing here later this month. And we also do an insights newsletter that Luis Gonzalez from my staff works with our marketing department to put together. And we feature a site or a building every month to the 400 site selectors. And we are constantly putting really cool assets in front of them that we think are move-in ready or occupiable or pertinent to their client base. And we've featured GSK, and we've done the Roche facility. We've done the facility, a couple Class A office buildings in Greater San Juan, Hatoré. We've done some things with the Isla Fria building in Sidra. Am I saying that right, Sidra? And so we're constantly looking for really good sites and buildings to profile in front of these site selectors, so that they know we're ready for their prospects. And then lastly, a lot of these companies are looking for professional services when they make the decision to come here. And we want to promote the professional service firms that are like MCA members and a Coner and various other contractors and consultants that are on the island. We want to reward them for being here. We want them to be part of these successes. And we have a list of some that we have started sending out. Obviously, we're expanding that list ever further. I do spend a lot of time referring people to the MCA membership list or ACONER's professional listing and things like that. I can't recommend one firm over the other, but I can get them directly to the organizations that matter on the island. So in closing, I hopefully I'm addressing a lot of the things that MCA is interested in understanding on how we are going after potential prospects and what we're focused on industry sector wise. And we think that hopefully that yesterday's success stories and press releases are just the beginning, and we hope to continue that momentum moving forward throughout the rest of the year. You guys, MCA represents the core of the value of the Puerto Rican farm industry. We want to enforce that. We want to build on it with gene cell therapy and other medical devices. We want to fill these facilities and find new vision, new investors, new companies to go. And some of the ones that are not just vacant, but have been hit hard by the hurricanes, need extra capital, but have good bones and need your professional services to get to the point of occupancy. My card is listed here as well for any questions. How am I doing on time? I haven't been paying attention.
Well, you're good. You're good. We're on schedule.
Okay. All right.
We have that was a great presentation, Michael. We have a few questions, and I think I want to get into some issues from a Puerto Rican standpoint of view about site selection and what has been going on the island for the past few years with regards to energy efficiency and all those certifications that are needed now or required by your clients. But first, let me ask you one question. When a company comes to visit, how do you proceed? Should MCA members meet with them, or how do they find out when you have clients and on the island, or what are they looking for exactly? Like, what would be a typical day for you?
A typical day for me, there is absolutely no typical day.
None.
My morning started yesterday driving at 7:30 to Aguadilla for meetings with the companies and touring the sites and meetings with the mayor and his staff. to talking about renewable energy, talking about, just all sorts of aspects and company has regarding the substation in front of them, road improvements, consultancies. They've hired architects and engineers to do the rebuild or whatever, because the one in Aguadilla is a Pridco asset, and it needs some work to get it to where the standards are that they're going to need. But it has, it's really good bones of a building. Then I drove back here, and I was in the office until 10:30 last night, working on a bunch of things regarding follow-up from the entire day. With regard to your membership, as I mentioned earlier, I literally give them the direct link to your membership directory. I cannot recommend one firm over another. So what I do is I show them the way, and I link them to Acornar if they want information regarding renewable energy, companies that can design the system, that can maintain the system and operate it, that can finance the system, that connect to Luma on the substation, figure out how do we put together all of this plan. So we also have a professional listing for other services like lawyers and accountants and things like that. I will say that we never start with the architects and the engineers. We always start with the accountants and the attorneys, because before they ever choose to come here, they're doing the single business portal, and we're doing the same thing. I can't McConnell Valdez over Farrell, but I can give them a bunch of them that are on the island that can be very helpful. And I can give them a bunch of CPA firms on the island as well that have done it, because I want them to have that extra set of eyes on the single business portal decree application, so that it's done right the first time, that there are no mistakes, and that the pathway to approval from DDEC is expedited. Same thing on the permitting side that they need from DDEC. So those types of expertise are extremely important up front. And then later, once they choose a site or a building, there is a possibility to plug in your membership earlier, because if they're starting to hone in on buildings, particularly when I set up site tours, like for the companies that were announced yesterday, I set up site tours of GSK, Roche, the Sam's Club, the Quest facility, the vacant former Pfizer facility in Barceloneta, many others. And we spent the entire, 3 days touring facilities. And they had an architect or an engineer or somebody with them, or a project manager type person, giving them input along the way. So if they didn't have that, I gave them recommendations at the time. Okay. So it's a very long, site selection is a very long process. It doesn't happen in weeks and months. And, to be honest with you, the fact that we got these two companies as far as we did in 4 months is in a third of the time that I thought it would take to get them as far as they are. So that's kudos to everybody helping us out along the way.
Yeah, congratulations. I have a question here. How is the interaction between Invest Puerto Rico and municipalities regarding the search for locations, buildings, etc.?
Well, in some communities it's great, and in other communities it's not so great. And well, some communities actually have professional engineers and planners and economic development staff. In other municipalities, non-autonomous ones, do not have that capacity. It's all about relationship building. So, and the ability to deliver. So we're working very hard on it. We've prioritized it in a major way this year. And, part of it is, meetings with people work a lot better in person than they do virtually, especially when you start talking, you're in a community and you're talking about a project, and you can literally get in a car and drive to it and walk it with the vice mayor or the city engineer or something like that. So we're working very, very hard on it, because it's important that we have these relationships. It's important when I have companies that, I have one company that's been to the island multiple times, and they're getting closer and closer to an announcement, which is exciting. But, you know, they asked me for connections to municipal leaders that I didn't have. And it was during COVID. And that was difficult because I wanted to get the city engineer, and I wanted to get the PREPA and, you know, person, and I wanted to get the mayor to be in front of these companies, because the companies that we work with, they really want to invest in the community. They just don't want to have a project. They want to be a part of that community.
Yeah.
They want to give back. They want a lot of these companies actually have programs where their employees decide how they're going to donate money to the community that they locate in and how they prioritize projects. So we're working on all of that. And you know, case in point, the mayor, I got a call from the mayor of Toa Baja today, because I met with him last week on Cytoimmune, and we're gonna meet with him and his staff to talk about other buildings that they have and other sites that can be prepped and ready for foreign direct investment. So it's happening. COVID just is not good for a person like me who normally can do something in 2 hours where I come from, because I know everybody, and I come down here and I'm trying to plug in. And so it just squelched all my plans to meet with the municipalities, and we're working on that. And coming out of COVID, we're going to be even better on it, and we're going to have key relationships with municipalities across the island, both for communication reasons, but also for business development and foreign direct investment.
All right. I have another question here. What types of properties are important to highlight on the island in terms of real estate, and what are companies looking for on the properties here?
Let me share my screen again. Oh, you're sharing my face right now. Well, I
can do the stop sharing, and you can go ahead and plug it back in. Go ahead.
Okay. So these are characteristics of key sites and buildings. One, properties that are exclusively listed, that are 100% owned by a municipality or a private entity, and that the representation of them, the marketing brochure, the profile of the buildings is coming to me from the person that has the authority, or the agency that has the authority by the owner to market it. Think about it this way. How many municipalities do you know that have sell sheets for their industrial park land or buildings that they have? Not a lot. And so we want to work with those municipalities to get them ready. Brokers, you know, developers, they know what a sell sheet looks like. But we have to have the lease rates and sale prices and all of the boxes filled in, so to speak, for us to market that. The types of properties that I'm talking about are extremely focused for this organization, are greenfield sites that allow for industrial development, okay, for manufacturing. So vacant sites that present well, that have sewer and water going up to them, they have broadband going up to them, they can, you know, they're not in the floodplain, you know, but these are greenfield sites that could be fully developed. The other thing is existing structures. The more move-in ready it is, the more, you know, the less work it needs, so to speak, the better it shows. So we've showed companies, you know, vacant Pridco buildings covered in graffiti with no windows. Some have not been interested, some have, because the lease rates could be so low. We've showed them the vacant Arecibo and Barceloneta facility that was the former Pfizer. There's a couple buildings there that have really good bones. There's one building that has a $6 million racking distribution system in it that has some great value for the right company. So my point is, you know, and for this group, things that sites and buildings that we can get to the finish line that can show well, that are exclusively listed and properly profiled. If it's a tough building that has a good shell, good bones, I'm not against showing it. I just want to tell the prospect, I want to show them the span. If they have a 2-year time frame or a long time frame, and they want to make the improvements themselves and get the credit for those improvements and have a low lease rate, and it's in the right community and it's next to the right university with the right talent, or near the right airport for a transshipment hub, advantages, we'll show them those things. But we have to have some firm, commitments. And you can go to Statebook, our Statebook site, and you can see about 30 different properties that we put up there that we can document that we're marketing, and we market them consistently, and site selectors go to that webpage, and we want more up there. So sites and buildings that are good for manufacturing, and then in the other industries, it's Class A office space where we can have some really cool, Silicon Valley and New York City, Manhattan type techie companies go, where they can have their own kind of funky space. That's awesome. We got some professional service firms too that want the space to look more like a legal or law firm. So those are the types of buildings that we're looking at.
Okay, so it's not just pharmaceutical and bioscience. You do also for, like what you said, offices for lawyers. Okay.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I didn't know that. I thought you were just for pharmaceutical companies or manufacturing.
No, we are, but we're
But
also
you branch out for other things.
fintech, insurtech, cybersecurity, professional services, those types of companies. And then all of these need renewable energy solutions.
Okay. Someone's you speak about certified buildings. A problem here in Puerto Rico is that not everyone knows about certification, and the Europeans are so far ahead in that respect. I'm speaking from the manufacturer Sartorius in Yauco. I mean, to have double certification for green building, both platinum, and they've made a significant investment in Puerto Rico. But how can we get clients or architects or future clients to understand that it's not a thing that is done in Puerto Rico, that it has to be done, but nobody is willing to pay for it? So how do we jump that step?
That's $1 million question, maybe $1 billion question.
Yep.
I want to get us to that point. I want to work with MCA, municipalities, and DDEC to start, thinking about how do we get to that point? Because if we want to compete globally, I mean, if you look at Singapore, if you look at Ireland, if you look at North Carolina, New Jersey, California, Indiana, our competitors in life science, where manufacturing happens. If you want to look where my hometown in Madison, Wisconsin, if you want to compete with the big boys and girls, you've got to play by their rules, and you've got to have the capacity. And I think we have the capacity. In fact, I know we have the capacity because our firms on this island built those facilities in Singapore and in Ireland and various other places. They've been a part of those successes, so they know how to do it. We just have to convince these companies that they can do it here, that we have the professional services here to help them get them to the finish line, and the government supports it.
Yeah, I think that we would have to be a government effort just to do more laws or more requirements. But I mean, here we are with the energy crisis that we suffer constantly. And I know that a bunch of companies and manufacturing companies and facilities, not only manufacturing or bioscience, but malls and everything, they're turning to solar panels and CHP. So everyone's trying to get off the grid, but the prices of electricity keep going up. So
Well,
how can we make it? How can we make it attractive for people coming here when we're gonna give them something that's gonna be so expensive?
Well, like I said, those two projects that were announced yesterday, both of them are looking at rooftop solar.
Yeah.
And one of them is looking at a 10-acre solar field microgrid. So they're aware of it, and they're trying to figure out ways to finance it. And trying to figure out ways to plan for it, implement it, and operate it. But none of these companies have any desire to run and to maintain solar panels and microgrids. They don't have that experience. They know how to make pharmaceutical, and that's where they want to spend their time. So that's one thing. The other thing is that investor platform that I mentioned earlier is really key, because I want to have renewable energy companies post their projects there and find capital, and I want to connect them to companies that are coming here that want renewable energy alternatives.
Okay.
So there's a multiple purposes of that investor platform. It's a way for renewable energy companies to get exposure that are looking to invest and build their own be it solar, wind, ocean geothermal, biodigesters. I'm trying to figure out a way right now. I've got biodigesters in a shipping container that want to come here, and they want to co-locate on every pharmaceutical and med device parking lot, and they will burn their waste and produce power. I'm trying to figure out, how do I put them in front of the companies that want to do that? I'm also trying to figure out how to connect the biomass that's waste product from growing hemp, plantains, bananas, take your pick, any fruit or vegetable on the island. How do I connect to those growers or those producers and get that biomass collected, hauled, and brought to one of these biodigesters and creating energy?
Yeah.
These are the connections that we're trying to make. Sam Tallman from Gail's team has an energy committee that is very engaged in the RFP right now and is very engaged in alternatives. He's actually trying to put together a list of, if you're a company and you're coming here and you want to get access to alternative energies, here are like 20 different things to think about. We already have our energy profile, which is kind of markets the energy sector on the island, but he's trying to create an FAQ and a list of resources that are available for companies to plug in and know there's a critical mass of alternatives that they can go after that might work for their project. We were just discussing this yesterday on how to take the sector profile for energy to the next step. And that's one of the ideas that we came up with. And it could be waste haulers. It could be, it can be many, many things. It doesn't have to just be solar. And we love solar, but there are many other alternatives that might be better, even in the hydroelectric side of things. So
I agree. And we're being buried in waste. So it would be a nice way to get rid of it and get something for it.
oh, well, the other thing is we had 90 some landfills a couple of decades ago, and we're down to less than 30 right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's be honest. I'll be frank with you. I come from a town that I have a green garbage can, a blue garbage can, and a brown garbage can. One is for garbage. It's the smallest one. And the other one is for recycling. And the third one is for compost and biomass.
Yeah.
And when I come here, I don't know what to do with my recycling.
Yeah.
I'm out of sorts. And the companies that are coming here, to be honest with you, are accustomed to recycling.
To having that system.
So we have a lot of work to do in that front. We have a lot of opportunity. The whole ESG component of economic development, the environmental and sustainability side, we've got to augment, and we can. And the government can play a part, but I'm a firm believer that the private sector can play the biggest part. They can lead.
They need to be engaged.
Yeah. Makes
I
sense?
agree. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm in that same mindset. It
Great.
can't be all government.
No, it
At
can't
some
be all
point,
government.
and this island suffers from that. But at some point, we're gonna have to take it into our own hands.
And people are coming down here with ideas that make total sense.
Mhm.
And they see the need, they see the market, and they have technologies. They just need capital on island people to invest in them. And B, they need relationships or networks or consultants to help them get to the finish line. And all we're trying to do is to create the platform for them to connect, to create a database of projects that that need services, that need networks. And we're just constantly, building our network of people. And I think organizations like yours are key to being part of the solution and leading the solution. I really want the private sector to lead down here, because when you can do something legal and make money and that follows the rules and is properly zoned and properly permitted, and you can do it in an exponential way, a faster way, which is what a lot of these companies are used to, they tell their friends. They say, I had a good experience. I got my company up and running. I'm connected. I'm profitable. You guys should come down here too. And I think if we have success in various things, simple things that government at all levels, the federal, the on-island, the local government can deliver, and we improve the foreign direct investment readiness of this island's government, the private sector, we could have $500 billion worth of new investment on the island in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so now that you mentioned that, and I know that there are few towns that, or municipalities, whatever you want to call them, whatever you want to call them, they're normally pharmaceutical based, like Barceloneta, Manatí, Aguadilla for aerospace now. And do you think that, yeah, do you think that maybe some municipalities just don't know how to achieve getting these sites and getting pharmaceuticals to their town?
Like
I
do. And I think I've said that multiple ways, that we want them to see the opportunity. I don't want to market just to those communities you just mentioned. I will always market to them, but I want others to be included in the pie. I want them to be ready. Luis was in San Sebastian. Luis Gonzalez from my staff was in San Sebastian. Sebastian, am I saying that right?
San Sebastian, yes. San Sebastian is fine, yeah.
Okay, he was there and he found 4 awesome buildings that have great potential, and he was meeting with the mayor, and the mayor was like, we didn't know you existed. We are thankful. How can we work together? We are surprised that you are marketing, you're interested in our city versus Aguadilla or some of these other places. We have to change that. We just do. We have to literally let them know that they are part of the equation. And if somebody goes in San Sebastian and they can gather the resources from Mayaguez and Aguadilla on the talent side, that's a win for the island. Yep. It doesn't all have to go to all Greater San Juan or wherever, take your pick. And so, we're constantly working on that, and we're surprised that people don't know about us because we were created by the legislature. Yeah. It's not like we just walked into town. Granted, the hurricanes did not, help our cause because we had a lot of things. We were created in 2017 and we had 2 hurricanes in 2017. Guess what was the priority? So, but yes, we want to, there are a lot of communities that I think are out there that could be part of the equation. They just have to believe, and they have to realize that every deal is not going to be perfect for them. They're not going to win every deal, but they can get exposure to other opportunities in many, many ways just by being ready, just by having sites and buildings, and by having staff that when my staff contact them, we can actually put them in touch with a company looking at a building in a matter of hours rather than a matter of weeks. We've had companies not stop coming here during COVID. I mean, we were having in July, August, September, October, November, we had companies coming in just about every week, flying in, looking at buildings, and we're seeing the fruits of that right now. We had probably 6 foreign direct investment, for FDI prospects that were PPEs, and we didn't land a one of them because the buildings that they were interested in, we couldn't get information on. And we could be manufacturing gowns, masks, gloves, kits, all here. So I just got off the phone literally 5 minutes before logging in. They came in and knocked on my door, said, get off the phone, they're ready for you. With a company that's looking here that has COVID kits and various other technologies. Clinical trials is another thing.
Yeah.
Clinical trials and contract manufacturing are the precursor to us getting a company to come here. We do not do clinical trials on the island well at all. And
Okay.
furthermore, we have contract manufacturers that we are marketing more and more when smaller companies want to come in and test the market. But if we can change, if we can augment contract manufacturers and clinical trial research processing, we had 7 clinical trial prospects coming out of bio last year, and we didn't land a 1 on the island.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and it's not from a lack of trying, but you know, now we have the company that's doing the prostate cancer clinical trial on the island.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you know that.
No.
I come from Madison, which is the home of Cologuard, for the lack of better
Yeah,
term.
the one, yeah, for the stool that you sent to the by mail to get
Yes.
analyzed.
Jokingly, we call it poop in a box. Okay. Okay. Well, the test that's going to be done here for prostate cancer is pee in a bottle.
Okay.
And why are they here? Because we have a ton of veterans on the island. And we have a ton of veterans with machismo that don't go to the doctor often enough. And they have prostate cancer. And so there's a high rate of prostate cancer here. And they fought hard to come here to do clinical trials. And they eventually found a hospital and a doctor and a clinic to work with. We need to figure out a way to make that happen all the time, because we could become the clinical trial research for Latin America or for the Caribbean. We could be concentrating on clinical trials that are really critical to our health of our population here on the island. And the contract manufacturing, we have good ones here and we're marketing them. But you know, we're supposed to be bringing companies, not being the business development arm of contract manufacturers. So we get into that squishy space and we still try to do it. But those two are lead generation avenues for companies to come here, because if they do the trial here and they're successful, and if they do the contract manufacturing that is successful, they might graduate into a new facility. And let me tell you something about Cytoimmune. They're going to test their technology first in Puerto Rico. Gene cell therapy, pancreatic cancer test in Puerto Rico. And it's not going to be easy for them, but they will figure it out. And they made that promise that they're going to start in Puerto Rico with their clinical trials. That is huge. And
That's amazing.
yep, I've been there when the mayor
It's
asked.
just, I think people are misinformed or not informed at all. So it's something that we need to work with.
Well, we have to create believers here, and we have to create believers off the island. And the believers here have to remember that it's not woe is me anymore. We aren't desperate. We are a very educated, very equipped island of people that is America's medicine cabinet. And we can be a part of the reshoring, nearshoring, COVID+1. We can be part of everything and everything that's critical supply chain. I've even got defense industry companies looking here from overseas, from Spain. That's another company or another country that we're targeting.
Yeah.
So all of this is possible. All of this is dynamic. We have a lot of work to do, but we hope that if we continue on our pathway, we continue doing what we're hired to do. We continue to have believers in the private sector that reinforce, and partners in the private sector that reinforce what we do. We will be successful, and we'll have more press releases like yesterday.